The US President Donald Trump is marking his 100 days in office with a mass rally of his supporters right there. But how does the first 100 days of his administration compare to other recent presidents?
Well, Professor Edward Blakely is from the University of Sydney and is a former White House staffer for both Republican and Democrat presidents. Ed Blakely, welcome.
Thank you.
Interested to note there that the president is turning up at this rally in Pennsylvania, a true heartland for his voters, and he's chosen to bypass the correspondence dinner, which presidents traditionally go to mark their first 100 days. Yet another sign that he is completely bypassing the mainstream media in trying to get his message out. What are the implications of that, do you think?
Well, the president's the president of the entire United States. Let's start there. And usually the president is trying to get more voters on his side. And particularly when we have major legislation like medical care, which one with immigration and so on, you want to reach out. And the best place to do that is through the press, if you can reach the press. And he's decided not to do that, which is an interesting ploy because he's going back to his base to shore that base up. He needs to keep it going if he's to have any success at all.
Do you think he's been effective at managing his own message to date?
Well, I think he has several messages. One of these messages is through his own tweets, okay? The other is through the alternative media. And last, he's the best person for his message. So he's taken a very different course. He's not going wide, he's going deep.
You talk about shoring up his base, and Pennsylvania being one, of course, also states such as West Virginia, where there is still a coal industry, or at least there was until President Obama moved to try and move to clean energy. Therefore, a lot of jobs were lost. Trump is saying he wants to bring those jobs back. Some have actually returned. In that way, he has been successful in the eyes of his own supporters.
He has been successful. Things haven't gotten worse for them. They haven't necessarily gotten a lot better, but they haven't gotten worse. So they know they have a champion in the White House. Where things are going to turn around is if things start getting worse and he doesn't have any program nor supporters in the Congress, which is really where it counts, to help him right the ship.
Sorry, when you say things getting worse, as in job losses, for instance?
Yes. Yes. Look, right now we have a situation where we don't really see the implications of the job loss because we're now getting the robots. So that's keeping the economy up. Production's still up. Europe is still down. But what happens if Europe turns around, the U.S. doesn't turn around, and jobs start going out or down rather than up? Coal's not really going to come back that far.
And that is the suggestion that this is a short-term fillip, if you like,
It is.
because these jobs are just for the near term.
For the very near term, alternate energy is moving up fast, and that's going to happen. The coal industry is closing on its own, not with the forces of the economy.
If we look at some of the other promises that he had made ahead of taking office in his 100 days, taking a look of whether he's made good on some of these promises, if you look at legislation, he's really made little progress when it comes to legislation.
None.
None whatsoever.
None.
The Obamacare repeal act has been stifled by his own party.
By his own party. And the new one that's coming out might be stopped in the Senate. So we might have what looks like Obamacare for a couple of years. And he doesn't seem to be troubled by that because, in fact, the existing system's working pretty well.
And he's pulling back on some of his promises. Building the wall, for instance, obviously that is a huge undertaking. They still haven't...
$60 billion of
right. It's a question of where is that money coming from. NAFTA. He was big on NAFTA, saying he was going to kill NAFTA completely, the North America Free Trade Agreement. He's now saying he wants to renegotiate the deal.
Well, the renegotiation of the deal is supposed to happen anyway. He'll get tougher on some things, but remember, Canada is part of NAFTA, and he met with the Canadian Prime Minister. I suspect that was a big part of that conversation because the Canadian economy is second to the American economy in terms of economic activity. He doesn't want that to fall apart.
Now, he also said that he was going to talk tough on China with currency, calling China a currency manipulator. He's also stepped away from that.
Well, when you've got North Korea, China actually has the trump card, to pun. China, he really needs China. Pence was here because he really needs us. He needs Asia. He's discovering the President of the United States has a leadership responsibility in the world. America first doesn't work when you have people out there who might want to do you harm.
So do you think that the charm offensive with China is going to work when trying to sort out the problems with North Korea?
The Chinese still have the upper hand. They are still working their program in the South China Sea. The president of the Philippines was on today asking for Trump to get involved in that. So Trump's being drawn into China. China realizes their economic advantage while he's weak to get strong. So they're taking advantage of him right now.
Do you feel as though he's been diverted from his domestic policy by geopolitical events?
Yes. Yes, but these geopolitical events were in the background anyway. And I'm not blaming Mr. Trump here. You really, when you're President of the United States, you do have to take things as they come to you. And that's come to him. He's been tough on this. Let's face it. He hasn't backed down. He hasn't acted like a cripple. He's been tough in Syria. So that toughness gives him a bit of weight in these discussions. So I think he's not done a bad job here. He made a U.S. position
But is
clear.
he opting perhaps more for a military solution, thinking that diplomacy just doesn't work?
No, I think he's opting for a harder diplomatic solution, one that puts the North Koreans back like the Iranians, taking some of that nuclear power away, and there must be a gift on the other side. Remember, the North Koreans are crippled economically. They can't even feed their own people. Something has to give.
And you'd have to say that he's making good, at least attempting to make good on that promise, and that he was going to be tougher on these sorts of issues, tougher than his predecessor.
I think he has been. And times have changed. The North Koreans, in a sense, have to rattle their sword a little bit in order to get anything from China and the United States. Let's see how this works out. Let's hope it works out for the best for everyone.
And Ed, coming back to the man himself and how he runs the country, who do you think is actually running the White House? How are affairs conducted within the Oval Office there, given that he has yet to appoint a lot of key positions?
Well, I started to bring in my big thing that says you are appointee of the President of the United States. It is a big deal to get one of these appointments, and you get a big thing that says you are an appointee. You have really major responsibilities in the White House to get things through that come through for legislation or presidential requirements and so on. This is a day-to-day business. It looks like Mr. Pence's office and the executive office is doing that kind of activity right now. Now, this is because you cannot delay it. When the wheat farmers need change in the tariff, and only the president can do it, he can't be off in Iowa someplace. He has to be there to sign that piece of paper.
Well, you said some of these issues are quite pressing for Americans and their livelihoods, but he's only filled around 70 of the 556 positions. He's going at a very slow pace.
Well, I'm glad I'm not one of them, because you work 16 hours a day when you're one of them. How the rest of this is being done is not clear, but I suspect the Vice President's office is taking up some of that slack. Some of the departments are taking up some of the slack, and some things just aren't being done.
Ed, you have been a critic of President Trump. You were a critic before he was elected. Are you prepared to change your outlook if he starts kicking some goals in the next 100 days?
Well, let's talk about the next 1,000 days, because the next 100 days are almost really over. That congressional mandate that he had is getting past him. The immigration thing is getting past him. He has to find a new set of goals and a new set of balls to kick, and I think he's going to try to do that. He is the President of the United States. He has to take on that responsibility. He's gradually understanding that. You can see that by the visits of Pence and others. He's gradually understanding that he's going to have some friends. He's going to start with his own base, as other presidents have, like Ronald Reagan, and see if they can start urging the Congress in his direction.
He's been accused of creating the illusion of action. If you look at some of the policies he's tried to ram through with the repeal of Obamacare, and also his tax plan, which wasn't a legislative document. Do you think that that might change? He might change the way that he's introducing policy and indeed legislation?
Well, I think you're making an assumption here that the president wants to do that way. I think what he really wants is for the Congress to come on side and do their work. He is not like Obama, who was a former member of the Congress, who can move that. And remember, Johnson was the very best, the master of the Senate. Clinton came in with skills like that. He doesn't have that set of skills. He wants other people to lead that side of the agenda.
Ed, always interesting to hear your analysis. Professor Edward Blakely, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.